Welcome to Undo, the podcast where we rethink work, rest, and play. I'm Dulcie.
And I'm Yemisi. Hi.
And we are here to have the conversations that don't happen enough about ambition, identity, rest, joy, and doing life on your terms. So if you are done with shrinking, settling, or running on fumes, you're in the right place. Now, today we are going to be talking about rest, and we do not mean sleep. Because if you've ever had a full night's sleep and woken up still feeling exhausted, this episode is for you. We're going to dive into the 7 types of rest and the truth about why most of us are running on empty, even when we think we're doing the right things. Okay, this is a big one. Are we ready?
Let's go. I'm ready. I was born ready.
Okay, so we've been taught that rest is the same as doing nothing, or rest is only something we do on the weekend, or just, get more sleep and you're going to be absolutely fine. I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that's bullshit. Simply not true. It'd be good just to have a little chat actually about rest. And I always ask this, Yemisi, darling, how do you feel about rest?
Boy, let's dig up the old childhood wounds. Okay. To be fair, like we mentioned, like in the last episode, there's a lot about society and culture and how it shapes the way we see certain things. And rest is no different. Having the kind of mother that I had, she's a medical doctor, so an MD, got a PhD while she had 2 kids, and has been running her own business for a hell of a long time. Growing up, I didn't see my mom getting a whole lot of rest. And so that obviously informed the way I looked at rest. I thought rest was something you did when you were close to breaking down, as opposed to a regular thing. But for me now, it's a different story. In 2023, I had basically been white-knuckling motherhood and the stress and everything, and returning to work, everything, white-knuckling everything. Just holding on till that holiday. I had planned that holiday for 10 months in advance.
Yeah.
Got there, spoke to wonderful Celeste on the plane, and caught myself some COVID. So I spent 2 weeks sick.
Yeah.
I came back depressed as hell because I was like, what is this? Right? And the lesson for me was, you can't schedule rest 2 weeks of the year.
Right.
That's Russian roulette you're playing. And so the lesson for me was, I need to learn how to schedule regular rest throughout the year, not just one big one at the end. And so that's when I started to be super intentional. And that's when that Paris trip happened, that first Paris trip, because I was like, I need a do-over. I couldn't afford therapy at the time. So I was like, okay,
I need something.
I'm going to have to schedule regular rest. So yeah, that's like a kind of overview of my experience of it growing up and how I've kind of approached it in my own adult life.
I think so much of what you said, I'm sure many people will resonate with this idea that is sort of cultural. We both have Nigerian mothers, and there's very much that sense of, you didn't earn rest. What have you done to deserve rest? But I actually think that might be also generational, because I think there's probably everybody from every background is like, yep, it's exactly how my parents make me feel as well. Nap for what? What have you done? What have you...
I have to catch myself now, Dulcie, with my daughter, because there was a time she was yawning and me and my husband look at each other like, what have you done to me? What are you yawning for?
She's done a lot for her.
And so now I try not to say that to her anymore. Because I was like, you're perpetuating the cycle.
Right. Exactly. So I think there's definitely something around generationally, as 2 elder millennials, our parents' generations and those before them definitely have had that mindset of, you earn rest, you rest when you've worked hard, and rest is reactive. I'm tired.
Reactive. Ooh.
Yeah, not proactive, right?
Ooh. Please say that again.
Most rest is reactive, not proactive. And yeah, this whole thing around it being lazy or indulgent. And then, you know, we talked, I think it was last week, we talked about hustle culture, or the week before, I don't remember which week, but you know, that whole thing is even within this modern era, we still have these toxic ideas about busyness, and there's shame around being still or being deliberately slow. And, you know, there's a glorification in some areas of burnout and exhaustion. It shows you are about that life. It's like, I'm not about that life, actually. I'm a really sweet and soft girl. So yeah, I definitely think for me, keep saying definitely. I am on that journey. I've been on that journey of what rest means, and reconfiguring or reframing my understanding and appreciation for the power of rest. So if we take a step back and just think generally about why all these old stories about rest don't work, you know, i.e. that rest is a reward, not a requirement. We only rest when we're going to collapse. There's an idea that rest means, and I think I said it in the intro, doing nothing, but actually that isn't the same as restoration. And there are lots of different types of rest, which I will get into shortly, but people often don't know what kind of rest they're missing. So they're thinking, oh, I'm really stressed out, I'm really, really tired, so this weekend I'm just going to bed rot and that should be enough. They bed rot for the weekend. They do very little bar Deliveroo and Netflix. But come Monday,
I feel called out.
I'm calling myself out. I am actually having flashbacks of me in my bed, running to get the door to take whatever order.
Yes, the only movement of the day.
Yeah, I remember watching The Haunting of Hill House across a weekend in my bed. It remains, honestly, one of the best weekends of my life. But I got onto Monday and I was shattered. Because between fried food and adrenaline, it wasn't a restorative weekend for me. Comfortable physically, but it was not restorative.
No brain rest,
No. So there are some really hard truths that we need to face. Here's one. You cannot nap your way out of spiritual exhaustion. You cannot Netflix your way back to creativity. You cannot scroll your way into peace. Can the people say amen?
Amen, sis.
Amen. Stepping into my TD Jakes bag a little bit there. Okay. But genuinely, rest is complicated, or it can be complicated when we've spent a long time running away from it and not respecting what it can do for us. And so, I want to share. God, I feel like I'm trying to recruit people into a cult. I want to share with you something that changed my life for the better.
Please do.
Okay. So I read a book. I'd listened to an interview that this woman did. I think it was with Oprah. I don't know. I listened to so many damn podcasts, but I've listened to quite a few of her interviews. But eventually I was like, no, I need to read this book. And she had a really good TED talk as well. And I was like, okay, I'm sold. And the book is called Sacred Rest. It's by Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith. She's a medical doctor, but she wanted to understand rest and really unpick and reframe what rest was. And in this book, she outlines 7 types of rest. And when I tell you that reading this book and really thinking and understanding and digesting it changed everything for me, to the point that that's why it became one of the central pillars of Work Well. This whole thing about rest. Yeah, this is, to me, one of my absolutely foundational texts, like, for life. I mean, I feel like I'm really bigging this book up, but it's important to me. So yeah, when I read it, I was like, okay, so it's not lazy. I'm not, resting isn't me being lazy or indulgent or anything else. Resting isn't sleeping. Resting, it's not necessarily the way I've thought about it in the past. I don't need to go somewhere to rest. Like, there are so many different ways in which I can rest, but also understanding how am I depleted, and therefore what type of rest do I need to engage with to feel restored. And these were things that I didn't know existed, or I hadn't articulated it, but it was genuinely a revelation to me. Now, I will say, like, I am obviously heavily recommending this book. She does write a lot from a religious or spiritual perspective. So if you aren't religious, if you are an atheist or agnostic or whatever, like, please don't let that put you off. I will talk a bit about that when I talk about the last type of rest. So just to, just give fair warning that it is written, parts of it, well, really only one of the 7 types is written from that perspective. But I would still recommend, if you are someone who doesn't follow any faith or spiritual tradition, it's still well worth a read.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about the 7 types of rest.
Let's go.
And I will try and I'm just going to give headlines on it. Read the book is the headline here.
Read the damn book.
But here are the 7 types of rest. The first one is physical rest. So that includes things like sleep and taking naps. That's passive rest. Or active rest, which is things like stretching, exercise, massage. She says a really interesting, I should have actually pulled out the specific quote, but she says something really interesting about sleep when challenging this idea that rest and sleep are one and the same. She's like, good sleep is not rest. It's just a side effect of a well-rested person. Yeah, so sleep, just getting more sleep isn't going to make you more rested or is not going to restore you. And I think most of us who struggle with rest right now will be like, yep, I have had nights where I've slept for 10 good hours and I have felt like I was just hit by a truck. So she was saying good sleep is actually an outcome of a rested person. I was like, oh my God. She said this in like the first few chapters. I was like, oh bitch, you got me.
So it's not about the number of hours, because there's been times where I know for a fact I've not had my 8 hours, but I felt really good waking up. So that's because I had a restful day.
So there are so many things within sleep, and Matthew Walker's book about sleep is also really, it's a bit scary at points, but it's actually really, really good. So I think if you're thinking about, if you really want to dive into sleep, I would couple Matthew's book with Saundra's book, because they talk about 2 different things. So Matthew will really go into the whole stuff around like how much you need, and everybody needs it differently. There's new studies that are talking about how women need a lot more sleep than men. So even this 8-hour thing is an average. Actually, some women will probably need closer to 10 or 11 hours. So there is stuff about time, but within that, what's so important is the quality of sleep. So if you have a wearable watch, ring, whatever that can help measure that, it's always useful to have those data points, right, of how much REM and deep sleep and light sleep, you need all of those stages of sleep, but how much am I getting? So there's understanding that quality. There's having good sleep hygiene, which we talked about in season 1, around like,
put your damn phone down.
Put your damn phone down. It's about no technology 2 hours before bed, especially avoiding blue lights. It's about trying to do things like reading. It's about having the same sleep and wake up time every day, no matter if you're at work or on holiday or whatever, right? It's about giving yourself those consistency and pattern and routine. All of that stuff is almost like the hard skills of sleep. And then the stuff that Sandra really goes into is what helps deepen that quality of sleep, which is the stuff that happens when we're awake, and how we can be well rested and well restored people who naturally will have better quality sleep anyway. Even if you only get to do a full, your cycles are roughly 4 hours a night. So even if you only do one cycle, you can still feel really good and refreshed. Obviously not if you're doing that every night, but that can still happen and you still feel okay, because outside of sleep in your waking hours, you are a well-rested and restored person. So yeah, when it comes to the whole sleep thing, I think those are 2 fantastic books to couple and to move towards. But again, nothing is overnight and no one's ever going to be perfect at everything. So it's things to feed your subconscious so that you start putting this stuff into practice. So yeah, the first one then is physical rest of the passive and active kind. The second one is mental rest, which is about slowing racing thoughts and giving your brain breaks. So I'm not a good meditator, but one thing I did actually like doing, and I still use, is the noting. So rather than letting a thought take you somewhere, of you being like, oh, there it goes, you know, that's that thought, and let me label it and then I'll send it on its way, kind of thing. So that separating yourself from your thoughts, because I think sometimes we can get so caught up in our thoughts. We'll be here doing something in the physical, but mentally we are on a roller coaster of all kinds of things that are going on. And I think this is especially pertinent for, you know, all the primary caregivers in their family, like, because you've got, you know, especially if you also hold down a day job, you'll have all the stuff you're doing at work. You might be sat in a meeting talking about whatever, the quarterly review, but you're also thinking about, oh, on my way home, I've got to go to Sainsbury's because I'm making this thing for dinner. And then also my daughter's best friend's birthday is next Tuesday, and I've got to get that little shit a gift, and I've got to do this
and Friday is not uniform day, and you're asking for a donation of £1.
Exactly. So I need to do that. I've got to give her the form for the school trip next week. I've got to do this. Oh,
I have to make sure her homework is done.
My parents-in-law are coming to visit in a couple of weeks, so I've got to get the spare room ready and all that. But then you're also back in the room in the meeting, and you've got people asking you questions and you're answering. So you're operating on so many different levels at the same time, and it can be so easy to be pulled along with all of those thoughts. So the mental rest piece is about how to disengage in a way, and how to maintain some sort of serenity and separation from all the thoughts, and just giving yourself a break from the stuff in your head. So the third one is sensory rest. And I mean, it's kind of obvious, it's about your senses, right? So this is stuff like noise and reducing the amount. So I'm someone that likes a lot of quiet. I don't like, I like noise on my own terms. And I live with someone who doesn't seem to believe in silence. And it can be an incredibly, and I find it very,
so do I.
Yeah, I find it so overwhelming. I find it so troubling. It's upsetting, disturbing, perturbing, you know. I have all the words for it because it really pisses me off. But it's important to have sensory rest. So that's getting away from screens. We've talked again in that episode around technology boundaries and blue light and the effect it has on your hormones. Like it has a really, really well-researched and notable effect on how your system operates. So it is important to give yourself a break from these outside inputs. But sensory rest doesn't just mean cutting things off. It also means, how can I use my senses to encourage rest? So one thing for me that I don't think I realized until I read this book, but I've been practicing for a really long time, is using smell and scent as a way of resting me. So you'll remember, like back in Edinburgh, my home always smelled really nice. I love a scent. Like, I'm a real scent girl, and I don't think and I would hone in on specific things. Like neroli for me is always my base. Like, if I want to feel calm, comfortable, and myself, I found that neroli, can't say it properly, is a scent that is very grounding for me for whatever reason. And everyone has a sense that do something to them, right? So I will use different things. I'll use lemon in the morning. I'll use neroli in the afternoon. I'll use a lavender mix in the evening. I have a lot of scents that I use in different ways. Scent for me, and this is just a me thing, everybody, obviously, some people, that stuff would just really not work for them at all. It'd be overstimulating. But I suppose what my point is, when it comes to sensory rest, as well as the things that we cut out and that we want to reduce, it's also, what can I do to use this? So if it's taste, part of sensory rest for me is going to be eating certain foods. Sensory rest isn't just the removal of things, it can be the inclusion of new things and trying different things. So that's a really interesting one for me with sensory rest. But creative rest is the next one. And this one is often misunderstood as like, you know, and for, like, I remember I used to do pottery, right? I love pottery. But that isn't creative rest. And this is such an interesting thing to me. She's like, you know, if you're doing artwork or whatever, that's lovely, but it's not creative rest. Actually, creative rest is about reconnection to awe, to wonder, to inspiration, to beauty. So actually, it might be going to a gallery to look at art. It might be going for a nature walk and just actually taking time to look at trees and leaves and flowers. It might be sitting at your desk and turning towards a window and just looking outside, looking to the sky, looking at clouds, and just taking time to really appreciate what you see and to just reconnect with that inspiration that exists around us. It might be just a ray of sun hitting your wall in a funny little way. It might be touching your desk and feeling that texture. It might be putting your feet in the rug and just, so I think it's appreciating what's around us. It can be combined with sensory rest, but it's appreciating, not feeling the need to create, not feeling but actually allowing yourself to consume with wonder, which I really love as well.
You know what's funny? I had a bit of creative rest when we were in your car driving the other day.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed this lady with she was wearing in fact on two different occasions, they were walking past as we drove past, and the pattern on her dress, she had the first one was like a white dress with like a strawberry pattern. I was like, oh, I love that. Like I can just imagine it with like pink background instead of white. And so that was that first one. Then the second one, another lady as well, dressed as well, with I think it was a teal dress with like pink blossoms on it, and I was like, oh my goodness, look at this. So yeah, I think I didn't know it was creative rest, but
it absolutely is. Then the fifth one is emotional rest. So this is giving yourself the freedom to be authentic and honest. And this one's hard. It can
no
be
comment.
Hard. Yeah, but it is about like, actually, who am I? Let me reconnect with myself, and how can I move through the world with more authenticity? How can I detach? And we've talked about this sort of stuff already around detaching yourself from the expectations of others. And, and we will get into this a bit more when we talk in a few episodes about self-discovery and whatnot. And then the penultimate one is social rest. And this one is about balancing draining versus restorative relationships. And the thing here with the draining, like, it could be the people you love the very most. It's not about people.
It usually is.
Yeah. And it's not people that are trying to drain you or like,
exactly.
It's not about bad friendships. The baseline here is that you have done the work to nip out negative relationships in your life already. So it's not about that.
Yes.
But it is about when even your best relationships become draining.
I mean, parenthood, caring for someone,
right?
It drains energy.
In its very existence, it's a draining relationship.
Yeah.
And it's about understanding, okay, so how much am I giving, and what's been taken, and how do I also then indulge in some restorative relationships as well. It's not about taking yourself away or isolating, although there is a space and time for that, but it is about understanding what fills you up and what drains you, and thinking about the balance of those things. And then the final one is spiritual rest, which in the book it comes from more of a sort of American Christian perspective. But like I said, even if you are of any other faith or no faith at all, it's not just about that. So really, spiritual rest, for those who want, to sort of pray and lean into their faith, absolutely, that's what that's about. But beyond that, actually, it's about having a sense of belonging. It's about having a clear sense of your purpose. And it's a sense of connection and community. And so for a lot of people, it will come from things like church, mosque, synagogue, etc. But if that's not where you're at, it can come from so many different other places. But it is so important to find, especially in this age where things are so individualistic and we are so disconnected, and things are more and more virtual and online. And, you hear people like Mark Zuckerberg talking about the importance of AI friends over real friends. I'm like, this. We cannot go down this road.
Foul fiend.
Yeah, like, this is really dark. There is something so important, but I also appreciate, as someone who struggles a lot with loneliness, being back in London, that it can feel really, really hard to find that community and that connection. But that it's a form of rest. It's a form of spiritual rest.
And it's not either or. Like, it's like you can have a smorgasbord of options for spiritual rest. So it's not that, you can still lean into your faith, but also volunteer.
Yeah.
And, you can do multiple things to fill that spiritual rest category. The choice is yours, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are the 7 types of rest. I just can't recommend enough the book because she really dives into it. Some really fantastic case studies and examples and everything else. Also, she's just really bloody clever. So it's a really good and easy read. What we'll do next is living proof, because I have a really good example of someone who's understood what resting could look like.
I love living proof.
Okay, so living proof this week is the GOAT, Serena Williams.
One and only.
One and only.
Yeah.
Serena Williams didn't just retire. She reframed what stepping away could look like. So in 2022, she announced that she was evolving away from tennis. It's not because she was done, but because she was ready to make space for the rest of her life.
Mm.
Since then, she has talked openly about embracing a slower pace, about playing more with her daughters, since they've got 2, about saying no to pressure, about letting herself rest, reflect, and choose. I can't even imagine to operate at that level and then make these kind of choices for yourself. I can't imagine it was done easily. I'm sure she has a phenomenal therapist at hand to help her navigate this. But something that I really love that she's been doing is building something called Serena Ventures. So she has an investment firm that backs women and founders of color. And they have invested in some really exciting businesses. So she didn't stop. She's still that girl. But she rebalanced. She chose rest, not retreat. And I like it because it wasn't sort of positioned as burnout or collapse. It was actually just, here's the clarity. This is me now as a mother, as someone who has achieved all these things, as a record breaker, as a trendsetter, as a pioneer. Like, we cannot underestimate or understate the effect that she and her sister have had on tennis overall. Yeah. So for her to now say, okay, well, here's the next phase of my life and the things I want to do, and I'm still moving with purpose and power, but I'm also moving with a new clarity. And so she gave herself permission to make a shift, even when the world expected her to just keep pushing in the same way that she always had. So she didn't slow down because she was finished. She slowed down because she had more to do, just not on everyone else's timeline. And I love that. I think she is an amazing example of,
I love it,
of resting and intention.
Fantastic.
Aww.
Because it was about self-awareness and detaching herself from other people's expectations, and I love it for her.
Absolutely. And so to sort of a takeaway then from all of that is that rest is not the opposite of productivity. Last week we talked about productivity. It's not the opposite of that. It's actually the foundation of it. Because when we rest well, we show up differently. We show up better. And we show up better for the work that we do, for the people that we love, and most importantly, for ourselves.
Amen, sis.
Amen. Okay. It's time for the undo. Sorry, I sounded like Alicia Dixon then. Hey, what do undo? What do undo? So it is time for the undo. And by now you'll know that we talk about unlearning things and we talk about doing things in a new way. So what we want you to unlearn this week is that rest is laziness. It's not. It's just not. Okay? I want you to also unlearn that sleep is enough.
It ain't.
And we also want you to unlearn that doing nothing is a waste of time.
Okay, yeah, this is the one I need.
It's not a waste of time.
Learning how to do nothing. Wow, that's... Yeah.
So if you want to reflect more deeply on that, think about what kind of tired have you been lately? Because I think a lot of time we just like, oh, I'm knackered. Oh, I'm tired. Yeah, what kind? What kind of tired? Really think about it. Is it physically? Am I tired? Is it my mind? Is it my thoughts? Am I run ragged by my racing thoughts? Is it spiritually? Is it my soul? Am I feeling disconnected? Am I feeling isolated? Is it creatively? Am I feeling like I'm lacking inspiration and just lacking awe and wonder? When you feel that tiredness, try and interrogate a little bit more. What kind? Where am I feeling this? What type of tiredness is this? Because that will help indicate what you might want to do to restore yourself. And then think about, with those 7 types of rest, what one have you probably been neglecting the most? I think a lot of people, it might be creative. Because I think, especially working adults, we are so
we don't have time to
appreciate the world. No one's appreciating us, get defensive. And also, where are you pushing when you think, actually, I should be pausing? Just, again, this isn't giving you a baton to hit yourself with. This is giving you some reflections to understand yourself better with. It's not about judgment. It's about self-awareness. So start noticing what kind of rest you're actually craving, not just what's available. So it's not just, I can sleep. I have a bed. I've got a bit of time. I'll just sleep a bit more. Sometimes you are going to have to put the effort in to restore yourself in a specific way, right? But the most important thing is that you are satisfying those needs, those rest cravings that you have. You might not be able to satisfy it tomorrow. It might take a week or 2 or a month or 2 or whatever. But at least when you know what you need, you can start moving towards it in small ways. So, for example, if it was creative rest and you're like, I used to really love art. I need to get to it. Let me go to a gallery. That's great. But maybe you don't have the time to go for a couple of weeks. It doesn't mean you can't satisfy that. Like I said, go for a walk. Pick up a leaf. Take some look at that.
All around you. Look at the colors of the flowers. I mean, we're in spring now. This is a perfect time for creative rest.
So do something new then. Let's look at these. I would love for you to try or to choose one small way to practice intentional rest this week. So if you want to take those 7 types that we've talked about, here are some examples. It's completely up to you. Of course, you don't have to do all 7. Remember, I'm saying just choose one practical way to rest this week. So, for example, if you picked mental rest during the day, during a work day, and put it in your diary if you need to, take 2 15, 20-minute phone-free, screen-free breaks. That's it. Just like, okay, at 10 o'clock from 10 to 10:20, and then from 3:20 to 3:40, phone down, walk away from my computer. I'm just going to go for a lap around the building, or I'm just going to go and babe, you could just go and sit on the toilet if you want to. But just take those breaks and be present in those breaks and acknowledge that, okay, I've switched off something that is causing me that racing thoughts or whatever it might be, right? Sensory rest, you could have an easy one is a screen-free evening. I'm going to get home from work, I'm going to have a shower, I'm going to make dinner, and I'm not going to put the TV on, I'm not going to put the radio on, I'm going to enjoy my meal, and I'm going to get a magazine or a book, or I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to call a friend and have a chat. Other ways I can do things without relying on some of our normal crutches. Creative rest, you could just choose to go and visit somewhere beautiful, just because, we're so lucky, for those who are listening in the UK, that we have a lot of parks and a lot of green spaces. You probably live reasonably close to a green space, so maybe you're like, okay, let me just go and be in nature for a bit. Let me, even if it is hopping on the computer, let me go and look at artwork. Let me go on an auction site and see what they've got. There are so many different ways that you can indulge that sense of creativity and admiration and inspiration. If it were emotional rest, maybe this one might not be so small, but maybe
the pause.
At some point you might choose to say how you really feel. Instead of pretending. Someone might ask you, who are you? And you might tell the truth. That could be, and you see how it goes. And I'm sure you'll be surprised in a pleasant way about how, when you are living authentically, it can actually you feel your shoulders dropping. You're like, oh, I didn't have to keep this mask on all the time, right?
And that's part of healthy boundary setting as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you have to say how you really feel in order to enforce healthy boundaries.
Absolutely. So, pick one thing. You don't have to do all 7. Just start where it hurts the most. And just remember, rest is not indulgence, it's repair. Let's take a quick pause. If you've been stuck in routine lately, or if life's just started to feel a bit grey, this might be for you. The Play Project is a 30-day audio course designed to help you reconnect with joy, creativity, and that spark you've been missing. No pressure, no screens, just a few minutes a day to make you feel more like yourself. It's light, powerful, and fits into real life. And because you're here with us on Undo, you can get 10% off with the code PLAY10. Head to thisisworkwell.com/playproject or just tap the link in the show notes. Okay, let's get back to the show. So, books. If everything we've talked about has, spoken to something within you and you want to dive deeper, I have got some recommendations. I feel like at the moment I preach about these books. I'm gifting some of these books to people. The first one is the obvious one. It's Sacred Rest, as we've talked about, by Dr. Saundra Dalton Smith. It's a foundation for this whole conversation. It's a foundation for the Rest Well pillar of Work Well. And it is a really practical grounding and truthfully one of the most important books that I've ever read on rest and healing. And I feel like I've spent so much time reading so many books on things like healing and rest and all that sort of stuff. But this has been a standout one for me. Another one, it's called Wintering by Catherine May. And it's a really, really beautiful book about seasons and choosing stillness and understanding that there are seasons where things where there's more happening and seasons where there aren't. And actually it's about not forcing things, right? So yeah, a very beautiful, very, very lyrical book that's well worth the read. And then I think I talked about this book in season 1 when we did the burnout episode, but it's a really good book by I believe their sisters Emily and Amelia Nagoski. It's called Burnout, and it's all about understanding stress cycles. And when it's not just enough to stop, but to actively work on breaking those cycles. So, and we've briefly touched on it again. It was something that we talked about last season around sleep. So, the book by Matthew Walker is also a really good resource if you want to dive more deeply into the sleep book. And I would say just with that, there is some scary stuff about shortening life expectancy, blah blah blah. It can be a bit scary, but it is honestly true. And sometimes we need to face some hard truths about life and death and how we treat our bodies in between. Yes. So it's still worth a read, but just know that it's to help you, not to scare you. So you'll find all of these and more in the library on the Work Well website, and links for everything, including the library, are in the show notes. So I think that might be us. Ready to wrap up?
Let's go.
All right. So if this episode gave you a new perspective on rest, we hope it encourages you to slow down and to do so with intention. And if there is someone in your world who is running on empty, please do send it their way.
And if you've got a few seconds, a 5-star rating or a quick review really helps us reach more people.
Sure does. We're also doing some mini-sodes this season where we unpack real dilemmas from listeners. We are having a blast doing that. So if you have something that you've been wrestling with and you want us to help you figure it out, then send your dilemma to dilemma@thisisworkwell.com. And don't worry, we will always make sure that you stay anonymous.
Want to keep up with us online? You'll find all the links in the show notes.
Next time, we are talking about play.
Let's go. Drum roll.
This is the next pillar in Work Well around
I'm ready
more. So it's not something that's childish or optional, but it's something that we as adults need so much more of. So we're going to explore why fun matters and how to bring more of it into your everyday life. So
yes, I can't wait.
We will see you then.